Okay, sure. This is Ken Morse. I'm in Maine and help to coordinate the Maine network. We had a blue wave this election in Maine after having a Tea Party governor for 8 years, and a real strong food system activist who's been the head of Maine Farmland Trust has been nominated for the Commissioner of Agriculture. So we're very excited about some policy openings coming up.
Thank you, Ken. Vanessa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay, great. So I'm Vanessa Willinga. I work for Nebraska Extension. On February 4th, we just held a regional food systems summit. We'd never done that before at the university, and many of our food policy council members were in the room and helped us put on that event. And we're excited about, we're definitely in the early stages, so we're still trying to figure out how to organize ourselves and continue to involve and engage more people.
Awesome, thank you. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself? I'll take you off mute.
There it goes. I'm going to be on mute because I'm not in the greatest place to talk.
Okay.
I'm with the California Food Policy Council. I'm the council coordinator. We just released, I posted this to the big FPN listserv, our 6th annual legislative report. And it's now a year-round process. So we've already kicked off the report for this year, where we think some exciting things are going to happen. We have a new governor who's very interested in food systems. We're implementing the first of its kind law for home cooks in the state of California. And we have a sugar sweetened beverage tax ramping up to be a statewide battle in the 2020 elections. So it's going to be an interesting time.
Oh, that's exciting. Thank you, Peter. Liz, do you want to introduce yourself? I'll unmute you.
Sure. I'm Liz Gensler. I work at the Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems with Lindsay, and I co-coordinate the Michigan Local Food Council Network with Megan Masson-Minnock. And an exciting thing that we are working on right now is we had Michigan councils take the Food Policy Networks project Get It Together survey last fall, and so we're just getting to analyzing results and releasing those. So finding some interesting things out about what's going on in our councils.
Awesome, thank you so much. So many interesting projects happening. For the sake of time, we'll have the rest of you guys intro yourself in the chat so we get to know each other that way. And I'll let the folks at Johns Hopkins take the lead.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really glad to see the State Food Networks group back together, and I'm really happy to have June and Yasmin here to talk more about network weaving. Today is going to be pretty interactive, so we hope that you'll stick through the entire time if you can. We're going to break out into small groups, have discussions, come back together, share experiences. So we hope that you'll use this as a time to check in with each other, share what's happening in your states, talk a little bit about how you're practicing network weaving, and provide us with any updates or experiences or ways that you're thinking about using it as well. So we welcome you, and I'm going to turn it over to June and Yasmin to take it away.
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready to share the slides? And I'm going to put in the chat, there's some people like to look on their own screen at the slides. We are going to be sharing screen, but just so you know, here in the chat is the, and one thing that you might want to do is go up to view options in the little black box and say exit full screen. And that will make it so you have your chat attached to your screen. If you have a big enough computer, that really works really well. Okay, next, I think we can skip 2 slides maybe. Let's see. Maybe, okay, there we go, wonderful.
Awesome. So today we're going to be delving into how to increase local council engagement. So for this session, it's a bit special and intimate. It's state council folks who are on this call. We're going to talk about increasing engagement and also talk about how do you get long-term support from funders and donors. We'll be doing small groups with that. And then we'll go into how to be proactive in terms of inclusion. I know you guys have been doing some great work, and we'll have a conversation among ourselves on how to further be more inclusive in our communities. Next slide. So we'll go into the funders and donors section with June. We'll go into breakout rooms, report back, do the same for the section on inclusion with breakout rooms and reporting backs, and then talk about some commitments on experimenting before we do our final reflection. Next slide.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to start, but today we want to be really interactive, and I know that what we're talking about, some of you are already doing, and it's so important that if you are doing some of this, if you would share in the chat, and we're a small enough group that you can, we can have you just talk for a few minutes and tell us what you're doing in this area. So please be bold and share. If you just let us know in the chat, Yasmin will get me to stop talking. She's great at that. And then we'll give you a chance to talk. Okay, so I think that we know that if you want real change, you can no longer work siloed. You can no longer work as a single organization. We're really finding this out. But it's not that you just need to be a network yourself as a state council or group. You need to be part of networks of networks. And I know Ken has really, you know, he wrote a blog post about this. And so, you know, would love to hear anything new, Ken, in the chat if you want to share that. But you as statewide networks are in this incredible place where you are both have the capacity and the skills to be able to help local networks improve their networks and help them be networks. And then you can bring them together for learning, for leadership development, to work on state policy kinds of things. And then you are also part of, I mean, you're a network yourself within your state. You're, as many people said, oh, we're always partnering. And I just love that. And then you're part of a national network, which is what today is all about, where this national network is sharing, learning from each other, and figuring out new ways to work together. And next slide. So today we're going to just look at that part, that line between you as a state network and local councils and how you can help them be more networky and get the benefits of being a network. And so in a previous session, we talked about, you know, how powerful it is when you create a system shifting network. And now you can see you need system shifting networks. Each council needs to be a system shifting network. You need to be a system shifting network. And then the national group needs to be a system shifting network. And what that means is that you are intentionally becoming very diverse, inclusive, conscious of equity, because that opens up all kinds of new innovation and breakthroughs when you start bringing in different perspectives. And then as long as you can help the local networks, you know, really be very innovative and collaborative and self-organizing, so much learning is going to happen. That's when you begin to see that, you know, the whole food system starts shifting. So if we can get all three of these, you're going to start really working effectively, local, state, and national. That's when we're going to really be able to start seeing some, you know, changes kind of rippling out. And so today we're going to explore 4 leverage places. Next slide. where you can kind of intervene to really help local councilship, because you'll find that you'll learn a lot about being a system shifting network. The best way to learn stuff, in my mind, is to try to teach others or help others learn. And so this is a way that you can help the local councils become more networky. And so, you know, you can encourage them to become networks, not just councils. So many more people are involved other than those that gather around a table every month or whatever. You can create policy networks. And they're, you know, thinking about, we're just going to look at all these from a network perspective and how you can help local councils learn from each other, and how you can think with local councils on how to build a sustainable funders network. Next slide. So I'm going to kind of blaze through a number of these. And if you have done anything about mapping, please share, whether local councils or in your state, please share in the chat, and we'll try to give you some space to talk a little bit about it. But I think even the simplest mapping with a marker or Post-it notes, it really is so important that these local councils start doing this so that they think beyond the people sitting around the table. And so I have a set of mapping activities. We're going to just go through them very briefly, but you will have access to these directions. Okay, and let's say, Noelle, where are you from?
I'm from Minnesota.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah, you have done. I know about your network because I helped a little behind the scenes. Yeah, so how did you use them?
Well, one thing that we did a social network analysis map that also had people identify learning and capacity building priorities. And we were able to use funding from the Minnesota Food Charter Network to convene groups of people who identified a common learning priority. So that supported a gubernatorial's food policy forum last fall, just before the election, and also multiple networks converging to tour a food hub together.
That's fabulous. That's very creative. So you almost used it to kind of help a food policy network in the state, you know, that centered around the gubernatorial candidates. That's really fabulous. So, but you don't, you know, they use software, but all you need to use is Post-it notes and have a big wall or a big piece of paper somewhere, or now you can do these virtual Post-it note activities as well, and you might want to explore that. But what you're trying to do is especially find out who is missing. Get them to really think about who is missing. You know, certain types of organizations, young people, people that you're trying to help, you know, food insecure, people of color are often missing from both your council or your council's network. And so go to the next slide. So I'm just going to run through a simple, and these are slides, you know, mapping your local council. You can remove these from the PowerPoint and use them. Next slide. So, so you want to help your council be more diverse and inclusive. You want to invite people into projects that you're doing, because not everybody can be on your council. You can only have so many people. And so one way to get more people involved is projects specific projects that you're working on. Things like Noelle was talking about, you know, having learning groups or whatever to share. And those are projects, and you can invite in folks to those who don't have enough time to be on your council. Next slide. So here's all the directions. I'm not going to read them, but they are there for you to do a mapping activity, and you can do it with your, you know, if you have a statewide conference or whatever, you can have each local group get together and do some mapping there, or you can do it just like we're doing here. You can do it online. Next slide. But just real briefly, you know, first of all, it's really good to map your council members, because you'd be surprised if you ask them, okay, put a solid line if you've worked together, but put a dotted line if you just really kind of know that person, but you don't know them really well. And you might be surprised that some people don't really know each other in your council, and you can do some activities, encourage some twosies, I call them, so people can get to know each other. And, you know, to know each other means, and trust is built on really knowing about people's interests, their access to resources, their challenges, their skills, you know, where they kind of fall down. And so if your local council people don't know each other that way, you know, they need to do some network building activities. Next slide. Then, you know, you need to think about your projects. And so, you know, the best way to expand your network is to have some projects that have people who aren't on your council. And so think about your projects, and some of those projects you need to start emerging. And Yasmin's going to talk a little bit about that, about people who have been left out of your council, and they may have some great ideas for projects that you never thought of. And that's a way to bring new people in. Next slide. And then you're going to want to, and this looks a little crazy, don't worry, you know, but there's three things. You get people to put Post-it notes for different organizations that are not currently represented in your council or in your projects. You can get different kinds of groups like young people, seniors. Seniors are this incredible resource out there, people retiring every day. And how can you tap into them for your network? And there might be skills or resources that you're missing. And you get them to put these up with specific names. Okay, if you want to bring more seniors in, what's a senior? Who's a senior that you might ask, or who's a senior that might know about seniors that might be interested in your council work? And then you figure out whether they're going to be connected to, whether you're going to invite them to the council or whether they could be invited to one of the projects that you have. Next slide. So think about, you know, doing this, like it only takes a half an hour to an hour to do an activity like this with a local council. In the chat, you know, talk about how you can do this kind of mapping with how you might do it in the future to help local councils be more aware that they actually are networks and they need to be cultivating a network as well. So if people in the chat would, I know Ken has, Ken, you've already done a little bit of mapping, haven't you? Some Post-it note mapping or whatever? You're on mute.
I just unmuted you, Ken.
Yeah, we've been actually doing a little different process, not Post-it note. We've been looking at the Appalachian food system map and trying to. They shared some of their surveys, and so we're working on that with the local council right here that I work with, and with the idea that likely other councils in the network may expand on that once we feel like we are a little bit better at doing it. So we're still getting our toes wet, but I love the idea, and I just had an idea that I wanted to run by people. Wouldn't it be great if we had emojis, symbols for elders and for all the different types of people that make up our councils? And if we could use those in our mapping, it would be so cool, and we could compare different maps across our whole network in a very visual way.
Yeah, that might be something to suggest to Kumu. Anybody else? Emily talks about their monthly virtual call. She could show these slides, hand out these directions, and they could try doing a mapping activity. Anybody else have any ideas? What?
Renee just wrapped up a pilot phase I think in Maine. Or Renee, am I missing?
Yep.
Hi,
everyone. Okay, great. So Maine, okay, great. Renee, tell us about it.
Yep, so interestingly, Ken was on board with us to get this process started with the Maine Farm to institution group. And really, we had just wrapped up a mission, vision, values development process, and we really wanted to use the network mapping as a way to share our values with other groups who we consider part of our network, to see how they feel that they align or don't align. So it was kind of twofold, as you know, with the additional goal of really just fleshing out our network. We're a fairly new network, so sometimes we're concerned that, you know, we might think of partners as being part of our network, but they may not identify that way themselves. So, you know, really just trying to reinforce those connections, and of course, you know, identify the gaps and the strengths. And we also see this as a tool to inform our funders, because many food systems initiatives across our state receive funding from the same funders. So I'm sure our funders would like to see how we're collaborating and partnering without duplicating. So that's our lofty goal, but we've just we've just embarked. So
that's great. So you know, just would love to hear in the future any applications trying to do some simple kind of mapping. And for some groups, I know in Minnesota in early days they had a map and they would keep it on the wall and keep adding things every time they got together face to face. And so they could see the map grow. So lots of interesting ideas on how to use this. And so if any of you want, think about some of these names of, like Tina did something like this, and Ginny, and so look for people who have tried something like this, and you can get some help and learn from their experience. Great. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Next slide. So the next one, so I know some of you are doing this, and I'd love to hear in the chat if you're doing this, is like, okay, how can councils learn from each other, and how can you have pop-ups or learning groups or whatever? This is aside from maybe your regular meeting, or maybe it's part of your meeting. If you have a virtual meeting, you can use the breakout rooms, but you need to find out the councils, what are their interests, their issues, their current challenges, their strengths. And so often you can send out a simple survey. I'll show you one in a minute about a topic. And I'd love to hear topics like that you maybe have found were really successful in bringing some of your local councils together. What are they concerned about these days? And what, like, it might be some not of interest to everybody in all your councils, but at least some of your councils might be interested. And then you just set up Zoom calls, and often find those who are further along. Like if somebody's done a great city policy, wow, bring them on, and not only have them webinar it, but have part of the session be going into breakout rooms where people talk about how could we do this in our community, and have the person who had the success talk about the steps that they went through, so other groups can really learn. Do you see how this viralness, it's just like, if you can take one success and help people, it's never a recipe. So they have to work through, how do you adapt this to your community? And so thinking about ways you could do this. Is anybody already, okay, Tina, they have a listserv so people can contact each other. But sometimes they need that chance to talk as small groups. So if anybody's doing anything like that, let us know in the chat. Okay, next slide. So, I mean, I've done things as simple as this. Which of the most following are you most interested in learning about with others? Do you have a challenge in this area? And how willing would you be to organize an activity around this? And if you ask those questions, you're going to get some really juicy information that you can use to determine topics for learning pop-ups. Next slide. So one thing, and I know some of you were part of sessions where I did some coaching, and talked about the peer assist process, which is just a fabulous process. And you can incorporate this if you have monthly Zoom meetings, which I'm hoping that you have. Zoom meetings are really easy, so easy, and people don't have to drive, so they can come to a Zoom meeting pretty easily. But a peer assist process, just a half an hour where somebody brings a challenge, everybody helps them with it, and then they all talk about what they learned from the whole session. And this is a fabulous process. People love it. And people who are helping learn as much as the people who with the challenge is what I've found. And Ginny asked, do you identify a challenge before the call? Yes, you usually identify the person with a challenge, and like you might send out an email and say, who has a challenge they'd like people to help them with? And then so you pick 1 or 2 people for your next call, and you have 2 30-minute sessions, and each one has a different challenge. And, you know, let everybody know about that, and then they can be thinking about it ahead. And Ken's shared gifting process is a lot, has some qualities of that, and that's a really wonderful thing that you can do too. Okay, any other questions I missed there? Okay. So let's go to the next one. Next slide. Okay, so talk about, you know, start imagining how you might convene something like this, how you might find out some topics and actually convene people in a Zoom session to either learn something together or to support each other with challenges. Just, you know, in the chat, just talk about how you might use some of these ideas. You're going to get some time in a breakout room to talk about this together. Okay, next slide. Okay, so then there's the thing about becoming a policy network. Like some local councils spend more of their time working on program. And so what we're going to do is look at, and it's partly because sometimes they don't have the network to really work on policy. And so if you can help them think about the policy work in terms of a network of people who are going to need to get to know each other, trust each other, and start working together, you know, and then the policy can flow much more easily. You don't have to wait until you have a policy to actually start building a policy network. Next slide. And so very similarly, if you're working with local councils on policy, you know, let us know a little bit. Have you worked with them on building a policy network? So if any of you have worked using that kind of lens, let us know in the chat. Okay, next slide. So here's just, I mean, here's this wonderful, oh, let's see, I've got the link somewhere. Here it is. This is a wonderful, no, that's the achievements. Okay, maybe oh, here it is.
Same thing.
Did somebody else get it? Oh, good.
Oh, yeah.
It's just down in the bottom. So if anybody can put this, but this is a wonderful, this circle, you can't read it here, but it's a wonderful idea of all the different kinds of policy activities that local communities, you know, have done. And, you know, I don't know how many of you have shared, but that's just a wonderful way to kind of get everybody thinking about policies. So next slide.
June, can we interject for just a second?
Absolutely.
This image or graphic comes from responses that we received from councils to the Food Policy Council survey. There's a question that asks about your greatest achievement, and it's from that we comb through and pull out great examples of policy successes of councils. And so that's where this wheel is generated from. So the more information you tell us, the more we can share it with other councils and put it into a beautiful graphic like this. And this is all courtesy of Ann Palmer and her idea.
It's a wonderful thing. And yes, the more you share, the more it's going to come back. See, the networks work on this thing called complex reciprocity. It's like you give stuff and more stuff will come back to you. And I think Ken's knows a lot about that with his shared gifting kind of thing. Next slide. But thinking about, yeah, it's really important to, yes, oh, Curtis Ogden's post, excellent. So you will get a copy of this chat. It's chock full of great stuff, and I hope you're taking time to read some of this. So just some activities to build a policy network. This isn't about getting policies approved, but to get them approved, you need a network. You need a whole set of people working on that. So you can have the local councils in your state, who've done something really successfully. You can use one of these Zoom sessions for them to talk about that. You can also help your local your local councils build this policy network. And again, mapping, it's just so good to get them to concretize all their relationships and see who's missing and give them some new ideas, which we'll talk, because there's lots of people who need to be part of just politicians. And so who are those other groups and people, and getting them to think about that and to build relationships with them. When they go to the state capitol, can they stop in and talk to, X? Or, if they're in the town, can they meet with an advocacy organization that could partner with them? And the big one is building this national learning network. And I'm just hoping that you all, if you find out that there's some local councils interested in a certain kind of initiative, can you find other states where the local councils have been successful? And I think this is where Karen and Ann can really help with matchmaking. So you can find places who've already done it and learn from them. And with Zoom, you can just set up a quick hour call, and then you'll know all about what the other group did, and you can get everybody all excited about policy work. Next slide. We're going to have to go through this. Okay, so has anybody helped local councils or worked with your local councils to build a funding network? Just tell us about it in the chat. And basically, I think this is where you all get together and you say, okay, we're going to not get on each other's territory. If there's a funder that we're both interested in, we can talk about going together, because going together, you can get a bigger pie. You can have a bigger ask. And so helping people, navigate. Okay, you can take that community foundation. We're not going to go to them. But how about if we work together on going to this foundation or working on this donor? And again, mapping really helps here. And especially, I know of some retired, and Emily, I'm going to need to get you a name, retired or volunteer grant writers. There are people around who, if you ask them, they will write a grant for you for nothing in many cases. And I think people don't realize that there are all these retired grant writers, myself included, and who are willing to volunteer to help people write grants. So anyway, here's some more suggestions. We've got to get into the breakout rooms, but I think it's one of the things that, if you heard my talk about innovation funds, next slide, which are small funds that can fund a number of councils. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is just an example of mapping. You can ask for, $20,000 or $50,000 and have a process where you hand out grants to different policy councils. And we just had 2 blog posts on the Network Weaver a blog about innovation funds with tons of details. And really encourage you to think about this as an ask for foundations that you could work to build that trust with the local councils, that you can help them actually get more funding. Okay, so now, next slide, we're gonna go into breakout rooms. We kind of poured a fire hose at you, but we want you to go in a breakout room. Yasmin, do you wanna guide them through the process here?
Yes, thank you, June. So we'll be going to breakout rooms. I'll be putting you in small groups. Let's see, how many people do we have? 18. Probably small groups of 3 or 4 people each. And there's a link in the chat.
At least four. Yeah.
And there's a link in the chat for your notes. Please choose a volunteer or have a volunteer take notes and facilitate. You'll do quick intros, and each person is going to talk about which of these options you're going to be experimenting with in the coming months, and what questions do you still have. So I'll go ahead and
so a couple things. You have to make sure you click on yes to get into the group. We'll be coming back at 53 minutes after the hour. So you have 15 minutes. So it's going to be a quick.
Yeah, and I'll give you a 1 minute notice that you guys are going to be brought back in. Yes,
question,
Ken?
a question. It looks like under number 3, there are 4 kind of bullets.
Mm-hmm.
The last one seems a little different than what we've been talking about funding that.
Okay, just forget about that one. That must have been. I'm sorry. That
Ken has a sharp eye.
yeah.
Right, go ahead and accept the invitation. You'll go into your breakout rooms.
Okay, Emily, Aurora, having any problems? You got to click on the little window. Anna Karen, do you have one? Yasmin, can you?
Yeah, I sent you a.
It might be buried under your window.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of pull down and close out some of your other windows? No?
I'm gonna unmute you. No, I can't unmute.
You can't unmute?
It's not letting me. Okay.
There we go. No, I don't see.
It should be behind. Is there another group you could put them in?
Yeah, except their group is only 2 people, so.
Oh, it needs them.
So wait. Okay, so let's try and find it. Yasmin, where would it be on ours?
It's back behind something.
Yeah, it's probably behind some of the screens.
If you can just pull some. Why don't you give them an invite to another group and then give them an invite back to this group again?
Yeah, so just reject the invite I'm going to send you, okay?
Reject it?
Yeah, reject the one I'm about to send you.
Okay.
Well, just don't do anything with it, but it should pop up.
Yeah.
Is it right there? Do you see it?
Okay, okay, now accept the one that I just sent right now. Do you see it? Okay.
We're not getting it. It might be because of something to do with our status. I don't know.
What are you? You're not host though.
No, but we somehow are not getting renamed. No, I don't see anything. Aurora also is still.
No, but she's on. I think she called in on one.
That's right. She's driving. Yeah, I don't. I actually do not see where. We're not.
So breakout room 3 has only 2 people, and so I wonder.
Well, so why don't you make them host for just a minute, and then they can go into that into break 3. So just make them host again. But you 2 have to come back. You have to come back at 5:51 or at 2:51. Okay.
Okay.
Now you go to breakout rooms.
3. Yeah. Join. Okay. Join 3 and give them a 1 minute warning at 2:50. You'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, and then come back here because you'll have to close out the rooms now.
Okay.
Okay.
Or you'll have to make her host again. Once you get in the room.
Yeah.
Never a dull moment. Okay, you're going to go around to the groups at all?
I can.
Good. All this good stuff. I'm going to read through.
They're really participating.
Yes, I'm going to read through all the chats and kind of see if there's anything we should highlight when they come back.
Okay. I think it's too late for me. I'm not host, so I can't go around to the.
Oh, shoot.
It's okay.
Oh, well.
Should we pause the recording? Thank you for reminding me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, pause the recording.
I have to request. Okay.
Can you do that?
I requested they do it. It's all right.
If they notice it. No, we just won't say anything controversial.
That's enough.
Mm. Wow. So exciting.
Mm-hmm. Very active. Jeannie advocated for maintaining SNAP funding in the farm.
Yeah, that was very impressive.
What is shared gifting?
They get some money, and then they get to decide, you know, where it goes. They have money, but they can only give it away.
Okay.
And so people pitch their projects and things like that. So it's a really pretty innovative process. I don't know how they get it.
Funder gives one of the and the Food Network money. Well, it doesn't have to be Food Network, but a funder gives, or is it pooled?
No, I think a funder gives them money, one or more funders. We actually have a blog post about it in the Network Weaver, an early blog, like one of the first blog posts.
Okay.
Great.
I really like Tina. She's always, they do a lot of work. Hawaii.
Yeah, yeah. Oh boy. So what we're going to try to do is I'm going to try to, write up about all the coaching sessions I did, and then just some other recommendations. And maybe if you want to be part of that, and then we're going to just have a final kind of wrap up session sometime in March. So we'll send out a doodle, and, it'd be fun if you could be part of that. So.
Okay. Great.
And then you can send me the bill.
Okay.
Not that I've gotten all my money. They lost mine.
What?
They lost the invoice. I mean, it's a huge thing, Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
Because it had the wrong date. It had a too early date. So it just got lost. Anyway.
Thank you for bringing me on to this project.
It's neat, huh? It'll be so good. I'm excited about it.
And learn from you.
Yeah. But you can see how much work it is. Like, you got to figure out, well, what kind of work do you want to do in the network space?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see that.
Some time this semester so I can figure out.
Yeah. No.
You guys doing anything for Valentine's Day tomorrow?
Yes, we're going to a little dinner with like 2 other couples or something.
Aww.
And the person's making all the food, and it's all dairy-free and gluten-free. I can't
believe how so fancy.
He is that, making all this food,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be really fun. As long as it doesn't snow, but it looks like it's cleared up out here. So that's good. How about you?
No, so actually Yannick and I broke up this weekend. So that was
wondering about that.
Were you wondering? What do you mean?
You have a little post on Twitter or something?
Oh, did I? Yeah, it's sad. It's been like 4 years. So yeah.
Well, we can talk about that sometime.
Yeah, but it's okay. We're still friends.
Yeah, that's important. That's so
I think we're best friends, so we'll figure out a way to morph that relationship. Yeah, but I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah, me too.
I was like,
okay, let's see. Okay, we got still a couple minutes left.
Okay, I'm really glad they're participating. So
Are they putting anything in the notes? Can we see?
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, I'm gonna look and see. Sometimes they do, sometimes, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh boy, some of them group 2. Lots of notes. No notes in group 3. How many groups are there?
4.
We forgot to tell them to scroll down to their notes.
Oh, yes. I should have told them that.
Oh, well, I should have too, you know, remembered. It's all these details, you know. Okay, can you send a message to, you can't send a message just to one group, can't? Oh, you're not even.
No, I hope they remember.
If not, we're in trouble. Oh, I can always go to the group. I can join the breakout room. Oh, here.
Hi.
Yay, you made it back. You made it back. Great, great.
Can you make me host again? Thank you.
You're on mute. Ann and Karen, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
There we go.
There
Got it. Sorry.
you go. Great, great, great. Too short though, huh?
Yeah. You could talk. We could probably talk. I don't know. What was that supposed to be? 15 minutes? Yeah. So by the time you get into the room and sort of do introductions.
Yeah.
Probably get at like 18 or something. I don't know. Yeah. We got in late.
It needs to be. Yeah. It needs to. Yeah. But still, 20 minutes should be the minimum for a breakout room.
Probably.
I've called them back, so they'll be probably back in about 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so do you even want the screen up?
No.
Yasmin?
No.
Okay, but let's do
the first one and
just
then
do a quick report out.
Yeah.
But we're good on time.
Yeah. We got plenty of time. And please join in as we talk about, for all of you guys, your experiences, if there's any things you want to share.
I'll do.
Great. Welcome
back.
Did you see messages?
You're going to do the report out, Yasmin?
Oh, yes. So everyone, please share. I saw the notes and you guys are taking great notes and having great conversation. What are some insights and questions that you have? If you want to report back in the chat, but if you want to also volunteer and maybe 1 or 2 people, I think we have time, June, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Vocalize some of the things that you were talking about in your group.
So, hi everyone, this is Renee from Maine. I was in a group with Ken from Maine and Aurora from Nevada. And Ken and I think we're just interested, since we know what each other is doing pretty much, we're interested in hearing from Aurora. And it sounds like they are fortunate enough to have had a former governor appoint and fund a state level food council. And the new incoming governor is opting to keep that in place, and they actually have a bill proposed to make that permanent. And then on the ground level with the local councils, she feels like there is some of that cross-pollination happening between the councils, but that Nevada is pretty well poised for a statewide network, which they don't formally have right now. So it was great to hear their approach and some of the funding mechanisms for it, and the need for funding, as well as Aurora, it sounds like, is based at Cooperative Extension, and it's Cooperative Extension that's really offering the TA for the local level councils, which is definitely a different model than what we have here in Maine. So awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. Someone else want to also share some questions you had, insights, things you want to experiment with?
Don't make sure you take yourself off mute, which
Yeah.
is real easy to just go down to the microphones. I think most of you can leave yourself, take yourself off mute. It's not, I don't hear much background noise anywhere. Okay, let's get someone else. Share a little bit of your conversation.
Do we have one more courageous volunteer?
Well, I'll volunteer.
Great.
Ginny and I and Anne with the Center for Livable Future talked about network mapping and just different ways of doing that, and kind of just how challenging it is to keep those things up to date and to really get people to utilize them beyond like, oh, wow, look at how our network is growing. And I don't know if either of you want to add anything, please do.
Well, we're working with Kumu to get a mobile phone-based kind of networking app that would really help stay up to date and have some modules with it that would help people learn how to read them and things like that. But that's why I really like starting with the Post-it note maps, as long as you can take pictures of them and bring it to each meeting or whatever. They're not complex at all. You're just trying to get people to think about like who's missing, who's not connected, that we can better connect. And so, thinking about your goals with mapping, it's just really, that's a nice place to start. And don't worry about the software kinds of stuff until you get like $15,000 or something, and can have a professional go through the process and really help. I know the folks in Minnesota are good at helping people learn from the maps and use the maps to build a better network. But it's such a big project to do the computer maps that it's often not worth it to do them unless your group is really, really committed to spend the time to learn how to use them. So, great. Okay, so I think maybe we better move on and take it over, Yasmin.
Thank you, June. It looks like you all had really fruitful discussions, and I'm excited to see you experiment with everything that June has proposed as possibilities for you. And I think this mapping is a great segue to talk about our next session, which will also be even more interactive. I hope that you can take yourself off mute and have a discussion here. So we want to talk about how to make our networks more inclusive. And so not just in the people that are part of our network, whether on the council or working on projects, but also thinking about what our priorities and our agendas are. And so I want to hear from all of you. I think that's the best way to learn. You are the expert of your food council policies and programs and also of your communities. So if you want to grab a pen and a pad so you can jot down ideas and questions that you have, that would be great. And I want to hear from everyone. Let's have this be a group conversation. So we all live in and serve in diverse communities. Each one is unique in its own way. And we all have a wealth of experience, insights, and collective wisdom in this group that we're going to share. So I want you to think about your community. What is your constituents in your community that your food council needs to reach? And is there a segment of your population, of your community, that presents the biggest challenge in reaching out? What community or communities or groups do you feel would be really important for you to bring in and to collaborate with? And so I would love to hear you just take yourself off mute and just think out loud with us. This is, I know sometimes it's uncomfortable to talk about issues around diversity and inclusion. We're all doing this work because we care about justice and we care about our communities and our neighbors. And so let's think out loud together. And I know there's some folks on this call who have also been doing great work and have been able to make some progress. But do we have a volunteer to talk about, is there a certain community group that you've been trying to reach out to? And, or is there a certain project that you're thinking of doing that it's important for you to collaborate with certain marginalized communities? Are you talking, Aurora? Let me unmute you. Okay.
Am I sorry? Yes.
Yeah, I suggest for this section, if you would all take yourselves off mute, it would be really great, because then you can spontaneously talk, okay? I know you're used to having them be on mute, and it's a polite thing to do in lots of settings, but right now we want you to be able to talk.
Yeah, so I'm gonna unmute you, and if you really need to be on mute, you can mute yourself back, but I'll just go and unmute everyone.
Oh, and thank you for telling me I was muted. But anyways, we have a double up food bucks program going on, and we are having a hard time getting people to use it at the farmers market. So I think that, you know, it would be nice to figure out how to connect with the people that can, you know, use these benefits. We don't know. I mean, I know that sounds probably very primitive, you know.
That's a great example. That's a great example.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's sad that we're having a hard time, and so we want to know how to be able to bridge that.
Can you tell us a little more? And I want your peers on the call to kind of use this as a peer assist, really, to talk out loud and to help each other. But can you tell us a little more about what the difficulty is and what communities exactly that you've been trying to reach?
Sure. So we have this grant from a Finney grant, and we're trying to spend down the money. And in our farmers markets, it doubles, you know, the dollars that are spent using SNAP benefits. But, you know, we just can't get people to shop at the farmers markets and use their SNAP benefits there. And perhaps it's the location of the farmers markets. Perhaps it's the perception that farmers markets are expensive. Perhaps people don't know they can use their benefits there. There's a variety of things. So the nonprofit that received the grant has asked for permission to also reach out to corner stores, and is starting to include local mom and pop stores in our underrepresented communities, which that seems to be a little bit more successful, but it's very slow work.
Yeah.
Okay, who has some ideas? Who's come across this challenge?
In Michigan,
go ahead, Michigan.
In Michigan, it wasn't double up food bucks, but it was a prescription for health program where people were getting vouchers to go to farmers markets, and what they found to get fresh fruits and vegetables. And what they found was that people weren't going. And so what they did is they ended up pairing them with someone that they felt comfortable with, who was a social worker, and helping them to navigate the farmers market. Because it was a very foreign space to some of their clients, and they didn't know how to do it. And so I think actually Lindsay, who's on the phone, might know more about that. I just know it from hearing people talk about it. But that peer or somebody you feel comfortable with taking you through that space seemed to be an important component.
So Lindsay, you want to add something?
I'm not sure I have too much to add other than the fresh prescription program that I was connected with definitely had employed food educators at the farmers markets, so when they went to run their cards, they would have access to that person right there, and they could do tours. And they often in some of the markets had celebrations associated with the market, which is just a good practice. So there's art and music and things there for the whole family. And I'll put in the chat a link to some of the reports that we created from that.
That's super. I think somebody else was going to maybe talk.
Yeah, so this is Renee in Maine, and I'm reminded, this is something that came up years ago. How many people remember the CPPW grants, Communities Putting Prevention to Work?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
that's what started a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they did great stuff. So when we had that here in Maine, they were doing a lot of work with farmers markets, and one of the things that was discovered is that people are really intimidated, and I think low-income people in particular, but anyone really, around weight pricing versus unit pricing. So when items are priced at a farmer's market or even in a grocery store, when we're trying to, get people to buy fresh fruits and veggies, and they're priced by the pound, and people don't really understand how much they're getting until they're at the cash register. And I mean, anybody who's bought, like here in Maine, fresh cherries when they're in season, and you have a little bag of cherries and you get to the checkout and it's like $12 and it's like, holy cow. So so what they did with the CPPW grant is work with some farmers markets to do some either pricing by the each. So a tomato would cost, say, 75 cents instead of $3.99 a pound, or do, create some visuals around what that means. So what does a pound of tomatoes look like, as opposed to just price, without really knowing around that kind of pricing. So that always just stuck with me, because I think any of us have experienced that, buying stuff by the pound.
That's great.
Anybody have any other thoughts about that? I think, Anne, go ahead.
In Baltimore, we did a whole blast with Department of Health and Human Services that they could actually use benefits at the market, because there was no promotion around it. It was really lame. And the usage, I remember the weekend they got the letter, the markets were totally overwhelmed. It was, and the usage went, up dramatically. So they didn't have the problem of not being able to spend out the bucks so much then once they had done. But it needs to be done kind of constantly. Like those kind of marketing efforts, I think, can't just be one-offs. I mean, that was a one-off at that time, but then they kind of figured out other ways of doing it too. So,
yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know if this helps, because we have several communities in Hawaii that are doing double bucks, and it's kind of networking on another level. And really, they had a couple women who this is on the Big Island where it's really spread out. A couple women who are volunteers who actually went and they kind of beat the bushes. They networked with all of the people on the ground. They're there constantly, and they just spread the word. You can get more fruits and vegetables with double bucks, and they just. So I've never heard them have a problem with getting people using that double bucks program, because and they're part of our network too. Yeah.
Yeah, identifying, they call them mavens, like women that know a lot of different people, and having them just spread it. So somehow you can identify that. But before we go into breakout rooms, I'd like to, and so I think people that you're trying to help, low-income people, is an important group to reach out for, when you're thinking about inclusion. But I'd also like us to talk a little bit about including people of color in the councils, both your local councils and your state councils, because I know that you care about that. And I think, is anybody here from Pennsylvania? I think maybe that's too bad, because they did a fabulous kind of input session that appeared to be extremely diverse, and it was just a great way. Maybe we can ask them to share some of the tips on getting. They had two big statewide meetings, and that brought up a lot of different issues about inclusion. And so I'm just wondering if maybe any of you have anything you want to say before we go on breakout rooms about being more representative of the communities that you're trying to serve. So have any of you had success in that area? What have you tried? What's been your challenges?
There are some communities in Maine that have a lot of new Americans, and many of them are engaged in various agricultural pursuits and forming cooperatives and different kinds of things. One of the food councils has started doing racial wealth gap learning simulations, which are a very intensive process that helps people. Some of you may know it. In New England in general, there's been a lot of work, food system work around the narrative about equity, and so this is one example. And so more and more of the food councils are starting to host those simulations, which I haven't been to one yet, but I hear they're very intense look at racial equity issues.
June is right. I think in terms of, who's the most vulnerable in our food system, and then who's on our food councils, usually there is a gap. And I think that when we have to think about is our networks, where are we pulling our members of our food councils from? If we're pulling from our professional classes, nonprofits or government agencies, which are really important to be there, then there's only going to be certain communities that are represented. And even if they're diverse, they may be not diverse in the class or ethnic diversity that we need, and we may be missing a gap. There may be a gap in terms of communication about how the food system is affecting folks. And there may also be a gap in terms of solutions. And so before we go into the breakout rooms, we wanted to talk a bit about the network approach to inclusion. And June, feel free to jump in at any time. But June and I were thinking about, Pennsylvania being a great example. They had an input session where people could come or call in, and had a lot of folks who are representative of diverse communities call in and give them their ideas. And so while their councils right now are not as diverse as they would like, their agendas have been shaped by the communities that, are impacted the most. And that, makes them reevaluate their priorities, agendas. And then also thinking about in terms of network approach, using circles, and taking those projects that are the ideas of these communities that we really are in the periphery and we want to center, and creating circles around those projects. And then how do we bring folks in? A lot of times people have said, we invite folks, but they don't stay or they don't become members of the council. And so we really have to think about, if you're asking marginalized folks to come in and participate, offering stipends for them to participate in the project circles. Not everyone is able to offer their time for free. And so if there are certain communities that we want to bring in, that might be a network approach in trying to create more inclusive councils. And then
Noel has some great ideas there, childcare, meals, but more and more groups are using stipends. They're just saying to everybody, listen, we've got to make this council more diverse. If you're like in a little 2-person nonprofit and you're a person of color, we're going to cover your time, and so we're going to give you a stipend, and that's something, again, you can go to funders for and give people, okay, for this year we're going to give you $2,000 for being part of our council, or $1,000 being part of our council, depending on how much is involved. So
the two women, the two women that I was talking about, that the Mavens, they are actually part of our food policy council, and we have to fly them in. So we just include them. They're on everything, and we provide, airfare for them, and, boarding and for our retreats.
Mm-hmm.
And they really do add a lot to our
huge. And it's constantly making you think, because, if they're representing, a community that's been marginalized all these different ways, and maybe, income too, you're going to have your mind just exploded by some of the creativity and innovation that members, they will add to your councils. So anybody else has some great, I think we're not going to have maybe time to go into the breakout rooms. I don't know. But can we hear about some other people's experiences?
Well, this is Peter from California, yes. And we've talked about stipends and not really had the money to offer them, but we found one place where it gets very dramatic. It's wonderful that health departments are paying their employees to come to Food Policy Council meetings. On the other hand, farmers tend to have to pay themselves significant travel plus time away from their farm. Yeah. And so the meetings get very skewed. Toward generally health departments, but also toward other agencies who can fund their people to join. So
but that's why Zoom can be really powerful if you have, like, I go to meetings and there's like a couple computers on the table, and those are people right. joining in by Zoom. They don't have to drive, but just a thought, Well,
I think it helps. I think the stipends help too.
Yes, but, yes. Mm-hmm.
Going out to the farms doesn't tend to help, because then the city folks all bow out.
Right. Any other experiences? What have you done? What have been your challenges?
This is Beth Smoker. I'm with the California Food and Farming Network. So we're a sister agency with Peter with the California Food and Policy Council. And we have 4 core values, and one of which is racial equity within California policy. And so this year, we have monthly meetings with over 50 members or so every month. And this year, one of our summer ones, we're going to turn into like a workshop training on one of our core values, and specifically around racial equity. And so we're still in development, so welcome any ideas or input, but we're thinking of putting together like a panel of folks that have examples of how people are doing engaging their communities, thinking about race within their work, especially within California policy around food and agriculture, and opening it up, for discussion, and so people can understand how they can start to do that in their work as well. So I'll keep folks posted.
Yes, please keep through the listserv and such. Keep us posted. That'll be really exciting.
I think
anybody else?
I think what June was going on is we have to be conscious constantly of dominant culture and how it shapes how we communicate, or even where and when we do our meetings, right? So Zoom is one thing, but if we're having our meetings on, right now we're doing a Tuesday at 2 p.m., that excludes a lot of different folks who may not be able to do that. And then just thinking about, when I think of, you guys are the experts in this area, but when I think of, as someone who comes from an immigrant community, about the food system, I think about a lot of the refugees who are working in the chicken factories. I think about the fast food workers and the momentum of Fight for 15, right? I think about the farm workers. And if we look at history, the folks who have had such the strongest and most powerful movements have been the ones who've been forced to have had the most marginalized or on the periphery. And so I think about it's not just for diversity's sake, but it's about how do we shift the system. I know you guys have already been thinking about and doing this, so I'm talking to the choir, but our councils need to be representative of our communities. Otherwise, we're missing out on so many great ideas on how to really push. I saw someone had said that they their council had been working on SNAP. Was it Noel? I may be wrong.
I mentioned SNAP-Ed, but I think someone else talked about multiple councils coming together to advocate. I think someone put that in the chat.
Noel, you're from Minnesota, right?
I am.
Okay. Yeah, so isn't Minnesota doing some powerful work on race and equity in the food system?
Yes. In fact, I was going to send this to Beth, but I'll just send it to everyone. It's actually a colleague of mine coordinates Metro Food Access Network, and they've done a series of critical conversations on race in the food system and have been really intentional about diversifying their membership and really the leadership, right? Like, we need people of color in leadership roles and being supported in those roles. So I shared that. Like I said, it's my colleagues' work. We've done a little bit in our local council, but there are probably people on the call like Yasmin who could better speak to this than myself.
Well, I have to tell you, somebody, a person of color a year ago got on my case because the Network Weaver site, all the consultants that were on there, we were in the process of redoing it, were white, and said, I don't feel welcome here. And so that was like a wake-up call for me. And I have spent the last year really you have to be proactive. You have to go out and find people. And, it's just like I made the pledge. I was not going to do any work anymore unless I was partnering with a person of color. And it's been the most, I got Yasmin and I've just.
We're on so many projects together.
Yeah, we love it. Yeah. And we love working together, and we've both been so enriched by it. And, I think that if councils could make that same kind of commitment, hey, we're going to spend the next 6 months reaching out, building relationships. It's not about getting token face on your council. It's about building relationships and really, realizing that you are going to learn and benefit from reaching out as well. So just my own personal experience and how successful it's been. And now, on the Network Weaver site, more than a third of the consultants, 30 consultants there are now, are people of color, and it's really helped that whole group take a different track.
Yeah, and I think about I think of it as gravity of sorts, the system that's been built before any of us were here. And if we're not lifting up and being intentional about lifting up these issues, it just falls to the ground, and we go back to the way that this whole system is set up for us. So we have to be intentional. And I think that what June was talking about is a great example of really reaching out and building relationships. And it may also, I have to warn, as some of you may know, these communities that you bring in may really challenge it. I think you should want that, really challenge the way that you run your food councils, what you think your priorities should be, what is the professional way of doing certain things. Things will have to change. And so I think that also embracing and expecting and wanting a change to happen within your council so that can be reflected in your community is really important way to prepare.
Yeah. But how about any others? I'd love to hear from some others. A couple people we haven't heard from yet. What's your challenges? What's your thoughts about this?
Yeah, is there a certain community that you want to reach out to and collaborate on a project with in your council?
So this is Emily in Ohio, and I would say that, our council is really cognizant of the fact that we don't have the kind of reflection in our membership that we would like. We're just in the process of setting formal governance structure, and we're going to be having an application for people to serve on the governance committee for our state network that will probably go out in the next few months. And, it's definitely something where, we want to make sure that we're reaching into communities, to places and people that we haven't heard from before. And I think one of the challenges for Ohio is, it's a large state that is in many ways like 5 different states put together in terms of the regions that we have, and the cultures of all of those regions are very different. So that even presents challenges, and doing that outreach and doing it really effectively. One of the things that occurred to me in listening to you all talk is just, connecting to local councils that are doing community and project work, and that being an important way to really try to pull people in as well.
Yeah, well, great. It's so wonderful that you're thinking about that. But, another thing is to actually map who are the communities, who are the organizations that, one time I went to, I was in northwest Iowa, and it was a workforce development network of 100 different people in organizations. And I showed them a network map, and here the population of that area, it's got a lot of food packing, was about 25% were Latino or African American workers. And yet in this map, there was one Latino woman and the far edge, the far periphery of the map, and that was it. Everybody else was white. And so, showing people that having that map there made them it was like a slap of cold water in the face. And then working through, okay, who do you know? What organizations could help be your pathway into the communities that are more representative of the workforce? And so you can map out, I just got on the internet and found 6 Latino organizations in the community that they could connect to and invite into their workforce development things. So thinking about, doing that mapping you can find people who can be gateways into communities, organizations that can be gateways. Go and talk to them, build a relationship, and ask them who might be interested in some of our council work.
And I would also suggest that in building your governance, that these communities are participating. They don't necessarily become members, but to build the governance and then invite them in is to create largely white created system and then invite people of color in and then wonder why it doesn't fit. And I think that a lot of the councils are largely white women. And I think that actually that's a great place to start, by your own experiences of going into male dominated spaces and then wondering why the women are not participating or coming in or don't feel welcome, right? And so I think all of us, no matter who we are, have been in places and spaces where we're like, this is not made for me. And I don't know if I am really going to be listened to or valued, or if this is worth my time. And so I think we all have been there, and we can take those experiences. And I would also suggest that in terms of bringing in leadership, you know, reaching out, doing Zoom calls with people that you want to apply, you know, and having that conversation and putting in that field work, and really, you know, recruiting and building that relationship. There's that trust that they know that this is a place that actually wants them and will listen to them and wants them to co-create. We're collaborators. We're not here to just help you, but we're here to work with you, and we want to learn from each other. So I think it's a really exciting place that you're in right now in the creation phase.
Any last words before we go on, just to kind of wrap up this session?
I just wanted to share something. We do more work with local councils than state networks, so it's slightly different, but the idea of not inviting people to your table, but going to their table first. And at the state level, that can be difficult, but I also feel like there's kind of an opportunity there. And I think of this as, you know, how do you start to do more systems work? How do you look at issues around poverty and education and build alliances? And that, to me, is a cool opportunity at the state level to say, there are a lot of groups out there doing that are, you know, not led by white women, that are doing some amazing work around poverty eradication and education, all these things that we know are huge predictors in terms of nutritional disparities, and that it's worth an effort to try and connect with those when you're looking at the state level network, I think, and start to build those alliances.
Yeah. There's a lot of great work being done by Black folks who are reclaiming land. And I'm here in New York, and there's food, there's gardens everywhere, and folks really leading in amazing ways, if we were to see. Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay, so if you have any thoughts or challenges or things you'd like to explore around that area, please put them in the chat. So we're gonna wrap up now, and
there's resources, June, I'm sorry. There's resources in the PowerPoint that you can go to if you want to read. Everybody's in different stages maybe, but want to read more about dismantling dominant culture and how to do this work in a more inclusive way.
Yeah, I love, there's an article by this woman, Tema Okun, and basically she's pointing out that things like perfectionism and such, and urgency, are really part of that culture that's holding us back from really being peers with each other and putting an emphasis on relationships and caring. And so really recommend you, they'll be on the slides that we will be sending out to you along with with some other resources. So basically we have just a few minutes left, and you know, we'd just love to hear from you. We have a survey, and there's a survey link there. You can start taking it. But while you're taking that, maybe if you are able to multitask, you could also tell us, like from this whole series, and some of you have been to all the sessions, some of you have been to only this one. But, you know, what have you gotten out of these sessions? And, you know, has it made a difference in your work? And I'd really love to hear from you either verbally or in the chat. And then if you would take the survey in the chat there, that would really help us figure out some next steps, because this is the end of this series, but who knows what might happen in the future together. So, you know, if you can just talk a little bit in the either verbally or in the chat about, you know, what you've gotten out of these sessions, or session if it's only been one. And then please, if you would take the survey, will really help us learn. So anybody want to speak up?
Noelle wrote a little something. Do you want to share?
I think that Noelle had to jump off. But yes, Anyone else want to add some
Well,
words?
I would add that these sessions have been helpful partly because we use Zoom, but we have not used the chat nearly as robustly as in terms of sharing all sorts of things. And I would just point out something I learned on an earlier session. If you go to the bottom of the chat, there's a little button that says more, and you can save the chat, which is really helpful, you know, because then you have the links. And
Yes, there's so many juicy links. I can't wait to check some of them. Thank you, Ken. That's really great.
And you know, there are things that have come up in the chat that we haven't necessarily had time to talk about that I don't know who is, you know, who is the kind of design group looking at future options, but there are issues in there, like one that there's some interest is that in some states the extension plays a
I saw that, yeah.
role, in other states not so much, and it would be great. I mean, extension here in Maine has been involved, but not nearly as strong as in some places, and so there's issues like that that I think can be pulled out of the chat that could be the basis for future discussions.
Yes, and you know, you can take the initiative yourself. I saw there were 3 people, and send out pick a time, get a Zoom link, and just have the session. I mean, maybe Ann and Karen will help you get something like that going, and so they're nodding yes. But that it's a great idea that once you find there's a couple people interested in something, you can set up an opportunity to talk.
And we've set up a listserv for state networks, so you can email that listserv if you want to start a conversation going with them and find a time to meet, and include others that may have an interest in the topic that you're talking about. And if I can chat it into I'll try and put it in the chat box after the email address.
Great. Any other thoughts before we take off? Been wonderful.
I'll just say thank you for convening us. A lot of great ideas. We just need time to process it all and put it into practice.
Yeah. And so feel free to use those slides. You can pluck out some, you can change them, you know, and use them with your groups. Those slides are meant for you to do what you want with them. They're nothing that's copyrighted. They're all Creative Commons. And don't forget about the Network Weaver site, because this would be so good to get all your councils. Oh gosh, my spelling, there's a newsletter that comes out every 2 weeks, and every 2 weeks there's another free, I think we're up to about 24 free resources that you can use with your networks and help you build your network. So really encourage you to not only sign up for that newsletter, but also to get people in your networks to sign up, because there's people. Ken has contributed to our blog, and I would love to hear stories from other of you in your network. We'll put you in the blog and you know, get you a little bit of visibility there. And it does seem like quite a few people are interested in about engaging extension. That sounds like a really good topic. Okay, well, I hope everybody will stay on a minute more in case you haven't. Anybody need more time to fill out the survey? I'm hoping you fill it out because we need to know.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, take